I am really happy to have Richard Nable, Rich Nable, my friend and experienced police officer from Atlanta, Georgia, back on our channel. We had very good feedback on our first interview together, and that's why I invited Richard back. We are going to talk about three topics today. The first topic is about how police officers make arrests and should make arrests, put it this way, professionally. Then the second topic is what is the best strategy to deal when we have a hostage-taking situation. And then the third topic is about civilian self-defense. We just know, for example, that United States has more liberal laws as far as self-defense is concerned, and Europe is very restrictive. And then that's why we are going to discuss these three. So first of all, let me welcome Richard to our channel again. Hi, Richard.
Hey, how are you? Glad to be here.
Thank you for coming back. And first of all, the first topic is about how to make an arrest. So as an experienced police officer, imagine you want to make an arrest. Maybe there are two different situations or more. For example, someone is in the car. Let's start from that, because I believe the situation changes if you make an arrest in a car or in a, let's say, store or in a house. And so let's start with a car. What should you do? What should you as an officer take into consideration, Richard?
Well, anytime you're making an arrest, especially on an unknown, which you may have some information ahead of time based on what the person is wanted for or based on what you witnessed, and that's the reason they're being arrested. But you honestly don't know what's going on in their head. The general rule for us is we don't want to play in their house. We want to make them play in our house. So no matter where they are, whether they be in a car, in a building, under a bridge, we want to bring them to us, if at all possible, before we would ever try to go in and get them. Going in and getting them is always an option, but it's usually the last or down very far on the list.
Okay. So it means, imagine you stop a car and you have a suspect, and for whatever reason, as police officer, you believe that the person, the driver or passengers in the car are suspicious. Let's say, what do you do? I mean, just as a layman, because I don't have experience in the field. Tell us.
No, I understand. Your level of suspicion and your own sense of alarm, I guess, would determine whether or not you feel comfortable handling the situation on your own or calling for more people. If there's no real time pressure or no exigent circumstances, no emergency, there's no reason why you can't wait for other police officers to come, especially if the officer is outnumbered. A normal traffic arrest, if it was just me and just one other person in the car, I'm probably not calling for backup unless I have some other information like, oh, he's got a criminal history for fighting with the police, or he's wanted for a serious felony. But if it's an arrest for some low-level traffic charges, normally without something else, it would be a one-on-one encounter. I'm gonna ask that person to come out of the car. I'm not gonna go in the car to try to get him unless I have no other options. So just kind of depending on a number of discretionary factors, if you can wait for backup, more is always better, but sometimes you don't have that luxury.
Okay, Richard, just imagine you are, just let's put us in this situation so we can bank on your experience and benefit from your experience. Imagine you are following some suspicious people. Let's say there are 4 of them, and oh God, 4 of them in a car, and you are on your own, you're chasing them, and you make them stop. Is it realistic, or is it too dangerous to do such a thing?
It's not always up to us. Let's try to put a few more specifics into it, because one of the things that may happen in a scenario like the one you say is I run a tag and it turns out that the car is stolen. The car is stolen. I can tell there's 4 people in it. There's no reason why I would immediately try to pull that vehicle over. I would try to get more police officers, as many as I could, before I even let them know that I have the intent to stop them. On the flip side of that coin, bad guys know they're bad guys. Most people driving stolen cars know that they're in a stolen car, and they see the police behind them. They're going to start slowly, or I guess, covertly trying to get out of your way in case you haven't noticed them. But if they see you following them, then they may even start running before you even try to pull them over. It's very rare that they would just stop and cooperate, at least in my experience, but it does happen. If it's time to chase them, then all sorts of different rules begin to apply based on population density, time of day, speed, what charges we know we have on them. And of course, the more serious the offenses, the more or the longer we would be trying to stop them or pursuing them or using other means.
Rich, how can you tell they're cooperative? I mean, I know it's a very straight question. Do you like rely on your gut feeling, or do you just say, okay, put your hands behind your back and he does, then you know he's cooperative? How can you tell someone is cooperative? Because it can change, right?
Yeah, it absolutely can change from moment to moment. But I have had people in stolen cars or people that I knew were wanted, and I've told them, hey, you're under arrest, do what I tell you. And they've done what I told them to do. That's not the typical outcome, because at least in my particular geographical zone, they'd rather run first, then they'd rather fight with you. And the last thing they'd rather do is just give up, because, most of them don't view the world through those lenses, I guess would be a good way to say that. But you have to gauge compliance, and you got to start somewhere. If I hit the blue lights and you pull over, that's cooperative, right?
Yes, I mean,
and
I have a question for you.
Sure.
You have a camera here, right? As a police officer, you're recording the person, so you have his face on your camera. Where does he run? I mean, where can he go? You're going to arrest him anyway. That's something I don't understand, that, right? Really.
Well, and there is a little bit of validity to that, but if he runs every time he's stopped and no one is there to chase him because, well, we have his picture, we'll just get him next time. Well, if he keeps running, we'll never get him.
Of course.
So at some point we have to get him. And people often say, well, you've got the tag number, you can go to their house. Well, that's assuming that it's the right tag. That's assuming that it's even registered to the same address where they live. It's assuming it's their car. It's making a lot of assumptions. So there has to be, by definition, some level of aggression, some level of force on the side of law enforcement. And, there's a reason that's part of the job title there, is we don't always get to request and get cooperation, and we don't always get to dish out hugs and handshakes. Sometimes it requires some level of violence, and typically that's a response to some level of resistance or violence that's committed against us first. So hopefully that makes sense and kind of gets to what you're talking about. But you're right, it's very dynamic and can change from second to second. A person that seems kind, cooperative, docile, and really the blink of an eye can become the exact opposite.
Rich, for example, you have a person in the car and he's sitting. You tell him to get out of the car. Let's say he is cooperative in the sense that he puts his hands, both of his hands, on the wheel, right? So you ask him to get out of the car, and he doesn't, for whatever reason. What do you do then? He just doesn't get out of the car.
Well, if you're handling it by yourself, there's a couple of things that you have to do. Again, one of the things we want to refrain from doing is actually going inside the car to get him. But I can say from experience that does happen from time to time. At some point, you have to do something. If there's no emergency and the guy cooperates to that point, and that's when he ceases cooperation, there's nothing wrong with sitting there, watching him, covering him, making sure that he doesn't do anything that puts either of our lives in danger and waiting on more police officers to get there. First
Yes.
thing I'd be concerned about is him driving away. So
Yes.
if I can somehow get his vehicle contained and then I can get more police officers to the scene, then we have a better chance of extricating him from the car without doing damage to either of us. So it depends on the availability of backup officers. It depends on the availability of non-lethal force options or less lethal force options, whether or not we have bean bags or pepper spray or tasers, any number of things. Most of the metro departments have those things, but a lot of rural departments don't. And so you just kind of have to work with what you've got.
Why don't they have it or have them?
It's usually a matter of money.
Oh, God.
And so, you know, obviously in the population centers, there's a much higher tax base and much more officer-citizen encounters. So there's more citizen involvement in law enforcement, but there's also more money to put into law enforcement equipment and training. You go to some rural counties, they may only have 5 or 6 law enforcement officers for the whole county. And they're making, I know in my state, a lot of our rural counties, the officers are making less than half what they do in metro areas. And they barely have enough money to pay their salaries and put gas in the cars. So it just kind of depends on where you are.
Is it, I know, I mean, it's my curiosity. Is it known how much they make? Or I mean, if you shouldn't say it? Okay.
You can check salaries. Off the top of my head, most of the metro area law enforcement agencies in the southeastern United States are probably starting off in the mid to high 40,000 per year. You move out to the rural areas, they may be in the low to mid 30s. Oh, but you go out west and California, or you go up north to New York, they may be starting out in the $80,000 to $90,000 range.
Yeah, that's what I remember from a police officer, a Matt in Chicago area, something like that.
And federal law enforcement usually makes a lot more than state or local, but that's not always the case either.
Oh, it's not the case. And then are they allowed, for example, to arm themselves, buy themselves pepper spray or additional material? Oh, they are allowed.
A lot of smaller departments, they really don't have another choice. And it wasn't that long ago. I can't say for sure that this still goes on, but certainly within the last 2 decades, there were departments around me where if you got hired, you were required to buy your own firearm. And that was part of getting hired, was you got to provide yourself with a firearm. And it had to be from an approved list. And sometimes the department would give you the ammunition. Sometimes they'd tell you, you have to go buy your own ammunition and it has to come from this list. So there's a variety of ways that things get accomplished.
Okay, so let's come back to the car situation, and you want to arrest the person, and then when do you decide, to use your firearms? When is the decision that the police officer decides? The moment he says, okay, that's enough.
Yeah, that's always a very personal decision. I've seen police officers, and it typically relates to either their lack of training or their lack of confidence in their training. But they feel like if somebody doesn't comply with them, well, that's the all that they need to produce their own firearm. I don't agree with that. I think that deadly force options should only be presented for suspected deadly force options. And it doesn't mean that you're not always ready. It doesn't mean that it might not be more available at some given time, but just pointing guns at people is frowned upon, and it is becoming more so based on the current political environment here. And I was fortunate enough to come up when law enforcement here was undergoing some pretty profound changes. Most of the officers when I was hired were former military and had no education outside of high school. And now it's kind of the opposite. Most of them have college degrees, and most of them, I don't want to get on the hook saying most, but a fair amount of them do not have any military experience. So their attitudes and their outlooks and their experiences are different.
Yes, of course.
And of course, there's more demand for accountability from the public. But as a longtime firearms instructor, I try to discourage people from pointing guns anywhere where you're not justified in using them. And that sometimes, especially in our culture over here, seems a little bit radical, but it's also, on the flip side of that coin, it is also something that is fairly universal in firearms handling, is we don't point firearms at things that we're not willing and justified to shoot.
Yes.
And I don't know, there's a lot of different philosophies, and you may even get some different arguments about that, but there's no need to be pointing guns at people that aren't doing something that warrants you shooting them. So pointing guns as a tool of threats is not something that I'm in favor of. I don't think that the gun should be used to threaten people. The gun is a tool that should be used for what it was designed for, and that's about it.
Okay, very good. So that's about, I understand now, if you want to make an arrest, a traffic arrest, so in the car. So so I learned from you that you want them to come to your, if I may use this word, turf, or to your
Yes.
area,
Right.
and not, you don't go to where they are. So so you don't get into the car as far as possible. You call help.
Call them out. Yeah.
Yes. And what about the home arrest? If you want to go to their home, so it's the same thing. Do you break into their home, or do you wait, ask him to get out, or ask her to get out?
There's no absolute answer, but again, the first general rule we try to apply to every situation is, I don't want to go into his environment. I want to put him in my environment, because whoever controls the environment has the advantage. So if I'm coming to get you out of your house, you know where your weapons are, you know where your avenues of escape are, you know where you can hide, you know how to get from room to room to room, things that I may or may not be able to figure out or may not know already. If I bring you out to where I have control, then there's much less of a likelihood of either one of us getting hurt. But if you require me, or your actions require me to come in after you, then I'm going to try to make sure that I take away all of your advantages when I do come in to get you. And there are different ways we can do that. And again, it depends on severity of the crime at hand, your own resources that you have available. A lot of times on our SWAT team, after we call you out, the next thing we would do is dump pepper spray into your house. And we have a variety of ways of delivering pepper spray or tear gas, either through launch projectiles. We had large needle on the front of our armored vehicle that would poke through the side of your house or through the front door, and then let go an enormous volume of pepper spray. There's a lot of ways that we can make you come out. And like I say, that's what we really want to do. We don't want to have to come in after you. And that has changed over the last couple of decades. It used to be SWAT team would kick the door in and flood the place with officers and yank you out by the hair. But we found out that just isn't quite as effective. And quite frankly, it looks bad. So we have changed over the years to where we want to bring you to us.
So it means that what we see sometimes, for example, like in the movies, where SWAT team just wait early in the morning, storm into the house, break the door. This doesn't happen as often, or it used to
Not as
happen?
much as it used to. I won't say it doesn't happen anymore. Search warrants in particular, where we're afraid of evidence being destroyed, things like that, we may try a dynamic entry. But the dynamic entries are not nearly as popular as they used to be, particularly even 15 years ago. We knock on the door, we call you out, and then if you don't come out, then we start going through a list of things that we can do to try to get you to come out. The only thing that might change that is one of your other topics that you wanted to talk about, which would be hostage rescue.
Okay.
And hostage rescue, you want the element of surprise as much as you can.
Okay. So we have the car, the traffic arrest, so we have home arrest. And now I have another question. Do we have something like a public arrest? You want to arrest a person, let's say, in a restaurant or somewhere, right, outside, in a theater or whatever. How do you do that then? You know, someone is sitting in a restaurant, you want to arrest him. How do you do that?
And a lot of times the same general principles are going to apply. But depending on what the charges are or what he's suspected of doing and any history that you might know about the suspect in the first place, you may want to try right off the bat, hey, can you step outside with me? Don't want to talk to you in here around all these people. I need you to come outside. Okay. If he refuses, then there might be no choice other than to have a fight right there in public. But it really everything that we do that involves force is a response to the behavior of the suspect. We try not to just rush in and use force right off the bat. So there's typically a reason, and most of the time that police officers use force, it's as a response to resistance from the suspect.
Okay, thank you very much. It was very lovely and very good answers, and I'm sure many people are going to appreciate it on our channel. The